Hey folks, and welcome to another edition of Israel Explained, this time talking about the negotiations for hostage release currently going on in Doha. So let's clear up a couple of misconceptions about these negotiations first. There's a lot of talk about how Hamas is not attending, and that means the talks will fail. But Hamas hasn't attended any of the talks, including those that led to the previous ceasefire that succeeded, and that's because, according to Israeli law, Israelis are not allowed to meet with Hamas. So they're not there. But the choice of Doha is not coincidental. Hamas has many officials there, and it's easy to run things by them to get real-time feedback on what's going on in the negotiations. We're also hearing a lot of talk about who already rejected the talks, who already rejected the deal. There is no deal so far. Right now, the sides are working towards a deal, and there's nothing to reject. So if you read that Israel rejected, Hamas rejected, none of that's true yet. It doesn't mean they won't reject, but they need to get to the point where there's a deal. Now, one of the things working in favor of this deal being achieved is that there's a lot of leverage here related to Iran. It worked out interestingly. Iran has been threatening to respond to the assassination of Hania, but they've been threatening to do that for 2 weeks now, and they haven't done it. Qatar has convinced them, or at least that's what Qatar's claiming, not to strike until after the summit and to see if there's a deal. That doesn't make much sense to me, honestly, because I don't think Iran is interested, particularly in regional stability. But the mediators have managed to leverage that into another reason why a deal has to be made now and not later. Another thing that's working in favor of the deal being now is the political clock, and that relates to the American political clock and the Israeli political clock. The DNC is in a few days, and the run up to the election starts really in earnest. It's going to be 2 months pretty soon up to the elections. It'll be very difficult for the administration to do anything. Meanwhile, in Israel, there is a break in the Knesset, so the government can't fall until October when it reconvenes. That gives Netanyahu some space to work before it does. So what we're seeing here is a great opportunity where there's a little space and there's pressures to get it done now. Because if it's not done now, it may well have to wait until after the elections. And that is many months. And by then, the hostages will not be doing very well. They're already not doing very well. So the framework for the talks is the Israeli offer of May 27th, the one that Biden presented a little bit later, the one that was accepted by the Security Council. But Israel has added some stipulations to it. Those include Israel controlling the Philadelphia corridor, creating a security corridor in Netzarim, that's in the north, so that anyone who tries to go from the south to the north of Gaza is checked. Checked for arms, and also stipulations that prisoners released, Israel have a veto on them, and they'll be exiled if they are considered very dangerous by Israel. Israel also wants to make sure that it gets enough hostages that are alive, but that's already in the previous agreement. And that's what Israel's really focusing on in Doha, from what I've heard, on trying to get a list of as many hostages that are alive as possible. Now, according to reports on Israeli Channel 12, the United States has said no, and the other mediators as well, to the check in Netzarim. Looks like that might be completely out of what the mediators are going to offer. But the question of Philadelphia can't be dismissed that easily because it's a very serious security concern. Israel's insisting that it have a military presence there. That is probably not going to be acceptable to Hamas. So what looks like is shaping up is there'll be a Palestinian force that is non-Hamas, perhaps with international elements, with electronic tracking devices, sensors, etc., and an underground obstacle that will stop new tunnels from being created. The IDF doesn't believe this is a very big problem. They think that when Hamas breaks the ceasefire, which they think is just a matter of time, they'll be able to go in and take Philadelphia over again. Nonetheless, it's a major sticking point. So here's what's happening. We've had 2 days of talks in Doha. We're about to have more talks in a few days in Cairo. In the meantime, working teams, so not the bigwigs who were there before, the heads of CIA, heads of Mossad, etc., are going to stay and work on some details. Then, after the talks in Cairo, where they're going to iron out some more differences, there's going to be another round of talks in Doha, probably in a week. I wouldn't be surprised if they're postponed, though, with the DNC coming up, and also with a lot of outstanding issues they might want to iron out before. But whenever that happens, probably not too far from now, the mediators, Qatar, Egypt, and the United States, are going to present a take it or leave it deal to Israel and Hamas. The idea being that whoever says no will get blamed and will bear the cost for the blame. And with the high stakes of Iran, maybe they're hoping that will work. There's certainly more chance of this working than the previous attempts. Now, Biden has come out and said we're closer than we've ever been, although he added, I don't want to jinx anything. Now, I don't take that very seriously. Biden has been a little bit of a cheerleader with this. If you remember the incident with the ice cream when he said there's going to be a deal, it's very close. He is not particularly reliable with this. What I found more interesting was Netanyahu's statement. He said, quote, Israel appreciates the efforts of the U.S. and the mediators to dissuade Hamas of their refusal to reach a hostage deal. The substantive positions of Israel are well known to the mediators and to the United States, and Israel hopes that further pressure will lead Hamas to accept the May 27th principle so the details of the agreement can reach fruition, end quote. Now that's a very interesting statement. He refers specifically to the May 27th offer that the Israeli cabinet made. Now, why is that interesting? First, Israel has kind of tried to pretend that that wasn't an Israeli offer, but was a Biden offer. So this is sort of embracing that. And second, that offer didn't include Philadelphia and didn't include the barrier Netzarim. So it could be that this is an Israeli attempt to show that there's give on what they're willing to do there. Either way, it's not a bad sign. It's interesting to see how much of a good sign this might be. Now, 63% of the Israeli public, according to Channel 12, is for this deal. The vast majority of the coalition is for this deal. The entire opposition is for this deal. But, of course, that minority, that 37% minority, includes a lot of Netanyahu's coalition partners. And that's one of the reasons, the fact that he has a little bit of room to maneuver before the Knesset reconvenes is an important element. But you have to note that 63% of the public wanting it means there's a ton of political pressure on Netanyahu to get to this. And Ynet reported today that Qatar has been putting more pressure on Hamas than anyone knew, and that they showed the Israeli negotiators evidence of this, and the Israeli negotiators were very happy with that. Quite what that means, I don't know, but it looks like Qatar is pretty invested in this. Remember, Qatar also called Iran and asked them to hold off on their attack successfully, or at least that's what they're claiming. So Qatar has their fingers in a lot of pies here in very interesting ways that we don't necessarily completely understand. Now, where we are now is a very sensitive moment in negotiations. We don't know exactly what the terms of the mediator offer are. And so Israel and Hamas are jockeying for position and trying to influence the offer to be as good for their interests as possible. So don't take anything that they're saying seriously. Try to look between the lines. Try to see what their interests are. Try to see what they're trying to achieve. When Hamas says that they're rejecting, they're trying to make things seem like they have a hard line bargaining position. We're probably going to see Netanyahu in a few days, knowing him and knowing his style of bargaining, also say very disparaging things about the deal. Don't take it too seriously. Take everything with a grain of salt. Hamas very well might say no. They're very difficult to predict, but there are definitely some signs that that they might be taking this more seriously. The American negotiators, Qatari negotiators, and Egyptian negotiators have all leaked that because of Hamas's bad position on the battlefield recently, and because of their unpopularity with their own societies, they have more of an interest of taking a deal than they ever had before. If you remember, 2, 3 months ago, I was saying there's no way Sinwar is going to take a deal because he's winning. I think that what really has changed since then is two things. One, the fact that the Palestine issue, the Gaza issue, is no longer at the forefront of the world's attention. I think people have grown sick of it. I think he's surprised at how quickly people have lost interest. And two, the new IDF policies of raids, hardcore, serious raids on Hamas interests have taken a major toll. And of course, the assassination of Hania is a reminder that he could be killed at any minute. And that's why I kind of think that Hamas is trying to reach a deal, possibly. And an Israeli source said that Netanyahu is swiftly reaching the decision point as well, where he has to, quote, either think of saving the lives of the hostages or his political survival. So we're really reaching a crucial point of decision. And over the next few days, the two sides will be thrashing, trying to get the terms better. I don't think that either side has yet decided if they're going to accept the deal or not. They're waiting for the details. They're waiting to see what kind of pressure is put on them. And that's why every moment, every day, every bit of pressure right now counts. And I think there's a real chance of a ceasefire, but I wouldn't put any money on it. Okay. So it's been a while since I did my last video. Work life has caught up with me. I do have a couple of questions to answer that are still relevant. John Price Sagi asked, "Can you explain how it's going in Rafah? Did the IDF decide to clear the whole city or just half?" So at its peak, all of Rafah was cleared. All of central Rafah was cleared of its residents. A lot of people have since gone back. The IDF is still present in some parts of Rafah, especially the outskirts, but it's not present in most of it. Going into Rafah itself has been very anticlimactic. They didn't find a lot of opposition there. They didn't find hostages. They didn't find a lot of the things that people hoped that they would find. Going to Philadelphia was massively important. That really changed a lot of the dynamic of the war. That's when Hamas started going on the back foot again. So you have to differentiate between those two things. So Israel's still in parts of Rafah. It doesn't really matter that much. Philadelphia matters a lot, and that's why it's a major issue in the negotiations. Agent Smith asked me, with Def and Hania now out of the picture, do you think Sinwar is more likely to accept the exile deal if offered? So I can always speculate, but my guess is no. I don't think Sinwar is leaving Gaza alive. I think that he is staying there to organize the fight against Israel. And if he can, he'll go back to running Hamas either as a political organization, running all of Gaza, or as a military organization, trying to harry whatever government is there. I can't imagine Sinwar leaving Gaza. And right now, that's not on the table in these negotiations. Some people keep saying that it is, but it's not. I don't see him leaving. I think that Sinwar knows that he's going to die. I think that Sinwar has known for a long time he's probably going to end up dead. And I think he's accepted that. I don't think he's that scared for his life. He's trying to save his life. But I think, like a lot of people, Mohammed Deif was another one. They knew that eventually they would be killed. And that's what's going to happen. I think he prefers that to being seen as a chicken and escaping from Gaza. That's just my feeling about this. Okay, so thank you so much for joining me. If you like what I do here, consider supporting me on Patreon at Shael Media. Also consider listening to my history podcast, the History of the Land of Israel podcast. I'll be trying to make these a little bit more often now that I'm back in LA, and there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. So see you soon.